Russia begins to worry as NATO and the United States make one of their boldest and most direct moves in Europe since the Cold War, deploying a staggering 15,000 elite troops to Germany, a move that signals both deterrence and preparation for any potential escalation with Russia. And while Moscow has long warned about NATO's creeping expansion and military build-up along its borders, this latest deployment marks a new level of concern inside the Kremlin, with intelligence sources suggesting that Russia sees this as a clear step toward positioning NATO for rapid offensive or defensive operations on the European continent. And within the first few days of the troops' arrival, local German bases in Bavaria, Rhineland, and Hesse have been activated at full capacity, with heavy equipment convoys moving through highways and rail networks under tight security as American Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, German Leopard 2s, and NATO artillery units roll into strategic positions, while behind the scenes, NATO command has linked this deployment directly to the ongoing tensions in Eastern Europe, where Russia's war in Ukraine has not only drained Moscow militarily, but has also raised alarm across NATO capitals about possible Russian attempts to destabilize regions like the Baltics, Poland, or even parts of Germany through cyber warfare and hybrid tactics. And just 15 seconds into this breaking update, let me pause and say, hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Please subscribe and like my videos, because what we are covering right now is a development that could reshape the security landscape of Europe and redefine the next phase of US-Russia relations. And as we dive deeper into this story, it is critical to understand that this deployment of 15,000 elite troops is not just a symbolic gesture, but a fully prepared strike-ready force capable of both offensive operations and defensive resilience, equipped with the latest military technologies including F-35 fighter jets stationed at Ramstein Air Base, Patriot missile defense batteries mobilized across Western Germany, and a new logistics command center directly linked to NATO headquarters in Brussels, ensuring that every move is coordinated in real time across the alliance. And according to Pentagon sources, these troops are drawn from some of the most specialized units of the U.S. Army, including the 82nd Airborne Division, the 101st Air Assault, and NATO's multinational rapid deployment brigades, with their presence meant to guarantee that if Russia attempts any sudden escalation, NATO will not need weeks to respond, but can instead mobilize and strike within hours, a scenario that deeply worries Russian military planners who already feel stretched thin in Ukraine. And for Germany, this is a moment of both reassurance and nervousness, because on one hand Berlin knows that NATO's presence strengthens deterrence and defends its territory, but on the other hand it also makes Germany one of the primary targets in any future NATO-Russia confrontation, and already Russian state media has issued thinly veiled threats warning that NATO bases in Germany would be legitimate targets if hostilities ever broke out, which raises the stakes even higher for European security, because Germany's role as a logistical hub means that any conflict here would not remain local but would engulf the entire continent. And analysts argue that Russia's concern is not just about the number of troops, but about the type of forces being deployed, since elite airborne and assault divisions can be rapidly inserted into Baltic states, Poland, or even directly into Ukraine if NATO ever chose that path. And although NATO has insisted this move is defensive, the sheer scale and speed of deployment sends a very different message to Moscow, one that President Putin cannot ignore. And inside Russia, reactions have already surfaced from senior officials, with Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov warning that NATO is crossing red lines, while Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov described the move as an unacceptable escalation that will have consequences. Though what those consequences may be remains uncertain, because Russia, despite its aggressive rhetoric, is still bogged down in Ukraine and faces economic strain from ongoing sanctions, making it unlikely that Moscow will risk a direct clash with NATO. Yet the very possibility of miscalculation now looms larger than ever, and European citizens in Germany are already seeing visible signs of this military buildup, with U.S. convoys moving through cities, German newspapers covering the story on front pages, and anti-war protests erupting in Berlin demanding that NATO stop militarizing the country, while at the same time, pro-NATO voices argue that this is the only way to prevent another Russian land grab, pointing to Ukraine as a tragic example of what happens when deterrence is too weak. And in Washington, the Biden administration has defended the deployment as necessary to protect allies and ensure stability, emphasizing that NATO's Article 5 collective defense remains ironclad, yet critics inside the US warn that such moves only provoke Russia further, risking a spiral that could push the world toward a wider war, and as the days progress, joint exercises are already scheduled with German, Polish, and Baltic forces, where these 15,000 troops will practice rapid deployment scenarios, air assault maneuvers, and live fire drills designed to showcase NATO's overwhelming firepower, while Russia on its side has begun shifting additional Iskander missile systems to Kaliningrad and reinforcing its western military district, signaling that it too is preparing for the worst. And as global attention turns to Germany, the fear of an accidental clash grows, because with so many troops, weapons, and aircraft concentrated in one region, even a single misstep, a radar misreading, or a border incident could ignite a confrontation that spirals beyond control, and this is precisely why experts argue that diplomacy must urgently return to the forefront. Yet with trust at its lowest point in decades, neither NATO nor Russia appears ready to compromise, making the deployment of 15,000 troops not just a military move, but a turning point that could define the future of Europe for generations.